The hiss of frying bacon and the crackle of an old radio filled the air inside the Morning Dove Diner, a tiny roadside stop just outside Chicago. It was 5:42 a.m., the kind of hour when dreams still linger, but bills don't care. Clara Hart tied her apron, the motion slow, her fingers stiff from washing dishes until midnight. She checked her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine. Same tired eyes, same forced smile. "Morning, sunshine," Brenda, the manager, said without looking up from the cash register. Her voice was sharp enough to cut toast. "We're short-staffed. Try not to take any charity cases today, okay? We can't keep comping meals." Clara bit her lip. "Got it," she said quietly, though her tone held the exhaustion of someone who'd stopped arguing with life a long time ago. Outside, snow drifted lazily over the empty parking lot. Inside, the heater wheezed like an old man catching his breath. The diner smelled of coffee, grease, and survival. Her first customers came in. Truckers heading west, a couple who didn't speak to each other, a teenage boy glued to his phone. Ordinary faces, ordinary lives. Clara poured coffee, scribbled orders, smiled through muscle memory. The tips would barely cover her son's inhaler refill. She thought about Ethan, 8 years old, sweet, funny, fragile. He was probably still asleep, his little chest rising and falling with that soft wheezing sound she'd come to fear more than thunder. The doctor had warned her last week. Without the new medication, he's at risk of another attack. She'd nodded, pretending she could afford it. "Refill, ma'am?" Clara asked a woman at the counter. The woman didn't answer. She was busy scrolling through her phone, her diamond ring flashing under the diner's flickering lights. Clara sighed and turned to grab a pot of coffee, then froze. The door had opened, letting in a gust of icy air, and a man who looked like he hadn't felt warmth in months. His coat was torn at the seams, his shoes uneven, his beard grey and matted. He shuffled toward a corner booth, head down, clutching a frayed cap in both hands. Brenda's voice cut through the moment. "Don't even think about it, Clara. He's just going to take up space." Clara hesitated. "He's freezing, Brenda." "We're not a shelter," the manager snapped. "One coffee, no refills. Got it?" Clara nodded, but her heart rebelled. She'd grabbed a chipped mug, poured hot coffee, and walked to the man's booth. "Here you go," she said softly. He looked up, startled. His eyes, pale, sharp blue under the dirt, met hers for a second too long. "I don't have the money," he murmured. "It's fine," Clara replied. "Just drink it while it's hot." He hesitated. Then, with trembling hands, he wrapped them around the cup as if it were the only warm thing left in his world. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara smiled and turned to leave, but the sound of Brenda's heels clacking across the floor made her freeze. "What did I just say?" Brenda's voice was a whip. "You think kindness pays the bills around here? That's coming out of your check." Clara lowered her eyes. He looked hungry. "I don't care how he looked. Do it again, and you're done. Understand?" Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes, ma'am." Brenda turned away, muttering about charity cases under her breath. The old man watched Clara walk back to the counter, his expression unreadable. He took a sip of coffee, then another, eyes glinting in the reflection of the diner window. And for the first time that morning, he smiled. A small, knowing smile that didn't belong to a man who had nothing. The morning rush faded, leaving the diner wrapped in a rare quiet. Snow had thickened outside, coating the world in white silence. Inside, the only sound was the faint clink of the old man's spoon against his cup. He hadn't moved much, just sat there, small, still, like a forgotten photograph. Clara wiped down the counter, trying not to glance his way. But she couldn't help it. Something about him pulled at her, something fragile, like a secret too heavy to carry. Brenda's voice sliced through the quiet. "Clara, stop staring at him. He's not going to tip you." Clara forced a smile. Wasn't expecting him to. "Good," Brenda said, jotting numbers on a notepad. "Because management's already breathing down my neck about employee generosity. This isn't a charity kitchen. Clara turned back to the window, where the old man's reflection shimmered in the glass. He was staring into his coffee, lost somewhere far away. When she finally approached him again, his mug was empty. "Can I get you a refill?" she asked. He looked up slowly, his voice rough. "I shouldn't. I don't have enough for the first one." "It's on me," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You'll get in trouble." She shrugged. "I'm already in trouble." He smiled faintly, the lines around his eyes deepening. "You shouldn't waste kindness on someone like me." "It's not wasted," she said. "It's coffee. Everybody deserves at least that." He opened his mouth as if to argue, then stopped. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "A long time ago." Clara hesitated. "Someone kind?" He nodded slowly. "Someone I didn't deserve." Before she could respond, Brenda's voice echoed from the kitchen. "Clara, I swear, if that man's still sitting there in 10 minutes, he's out." Clara flinched. "She doesn't mean it," she said softly. The man chuckled, a dry, quiet sound. "Oh, I think she does. She sounds like the kind of woman who means every wool word." "You're not wrong," Clara said, smiling despite herself. He studied her for a long moment. "What's your name, miss?" "Clara." "That's a good name. You look like a Clara." She tilted her head. "And you are?" He hesitated. "Sam," he said after a pause. "Just Sam." "Well, Sam," she said, pouring him another cup. "Looks like you're officially breaking the rules." He raised his mug slightly, as though to toast her. "Then I guess I'm in good company." The bell above the door jingled, and a gust of cold air swept in. 2 businessmen entered, shaking snow off their coats. Brenda rushed to greet them, her fake smile snapping into place. Clara exhaled. "Guess that's my cue. Enjoy your coffee, Sam." He watched her walk away, his pale eyes glinting under the diner's yellow light. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, worn leather notebook. His hands trembled as he flipped it open. Inside were lists, names, numbers, fragments of thoughts. At the top of the page, one name was circled twice. Hale. He stared at it for a long time before closing the notebook and slipping it back into his coat. Across the room, Brenda caught sight of the exchange and frowned. "Clara," she hissed, beckoning her over. "He's writing things down. Watch your purse." Clara turned sharply. "He's not stealing. He's just writing." "Yeah, sure," Brenda muttered. "I've seen his type. They play nice until you turn your back." Clara bit her tongue. She'd learned long ago that arguing with Brenda only made things worse, but as she refilled another customer's coffee, she glanced toward the booth. Sam was staring out the window now, the faintest smile on his face. His reflection met hers in the glass, and for a fleeting moment, Clara could swear he didn't look homeless at all. He looked like a man remembering the weight of something he'd once owned, the world. The lunch rush hit like a storm. The diner, once quiet and sleepy, now pulsed with chatter, clinking silverware, and the smell of overworked coffee pots. Clara moved like clockwork, refilling cups, balancing trays, ignoring the ache in her feet. Sam stayed in his booth, silent, his hands wrapped around the mug she kept refilling without asking. Brenda was watching. Clara could feel it, that sharp, burning stare from behind the counter. By noon, the place was packed. A group of construction workers joked loudly in one corner. A family of 4 complained about the pancakes being too brown, and Brenda barked orders like a drill sergeant. "Clara," she shouted over the noise. "Table 6 is waiting for their check, and the dishwasher's out again. Move it." "Yes, ma'am," Clara called back, juggling 3 plates and a pot of coffee. She poured a refill for Sam on the way to the register. He smiled at her, grateful but embarrassed. "Stop doing that," he murmured. "You're going to lose your job." Clara gave a small shrug. "Then I'll go down, knowing I did one decent thing." He looked at her, really looked. "You sound like my wife," he said quietly. Clara paused, her hand on the coffee pot. She must have been someone special. She was, he said, eyes distant. Kind to everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. Before Clara could respond, Brenda's voice sliced through the noise again. Clara, office, now. The air in her lungs froze. She set down the coffee pot and wiped her hands on her apron. Brenda's office was really a storage closet with a desk shoved inside, but everyone in the diner knew what a trip there meant. Brenda stood behind the desk, arms crossed. Sit, she said coldly. Clara obeyed, her palms sweating. You think I don't see what's going on out there? Brenda snapped. You've been giving that vagrant free refills for an hour, maybe 2. We're not running a soup kitchen. He's just having coffee, Clara said softly. That's not the point, Brenda shot back. The point is he's not paying. You think this place runs on good intentions? Clara swallowed hard. I paid for the first cup myself. He's just trying to get warm. Oh, you paid for him, Brenda sneered. That's even worse. You want to play hero. Do it somewhere else. You're done here. Clara blinked. You're firing me? For coffee? For theft, Brenda said flatly. You don't get to decide who eats and who doesn't. That's my call. Something in Clara snapped. You call this theft? He's freezing, Brenda. It's snowing outside and you're worried about a $2 cup of coffee? Brenda's eyes narrowed. You just raised your voice to your manager. Get your stuff and go. The words hit like a slap. Clara stood slowly, her throat burning. You can keep the job, she said, her voice shaking but steady. I can't work in a place where being human is against the rules. She pulled off her apron, set it on the desk, and walked out. The diner fell silent for a moment, as every head turned. Sam looked up from his booth, alarm flashing across his face. Clara passed him, forcing a smile. Finish your coffee, Sam. It's on the house. Brenda called after her, Don't come back! The bell above the door jingled as Clara stepped out into the blinding white of the storm. Snow swirled around her, biting her cheeks, stinging her eyes. She had no umbrella, no plan. Just the cold air filling her lungs, and a single thought pounding in her head. Ethan. Back inside, Sam stood, his face unreadable. He left a single folded napkin on the table and walked into the snow after her. On the napkin, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were 4 words that would change her life. You'll see me again. The snowstorm had turned brutal by the time Clara reached the bus stop. Her thin coat did little against the wind that clawed at her face. The streetlights blurred behind the curtain of white. Every few steps, her shoes slipped on the icy sidewalk. But she kept moving. She reached the corner and saw the bus pulling away. Wait! She shouted, running after it. But her voice was swallowed by the wind. The red taillights vanished into the storm. For a moment, she just stood there, shaking, her breath coming in clouds. It was a 5-mile walk home. She looked down at her shoes, soaked and fraying, and started walking. By the time she reached her building, her fingers were numb. The old brick apartment complex loomed like a tired giant, its windows glowing dimly through the snow. She climbed the stairs, her legs trembling with every step, and fumbled with her keys. Mom? A small voice called from inside before she even turned the knob. Hey, sweetheart, she said, forcing warmth into her tone as she stepped in. Ethan stood in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, his hair messy and his cheeks flushed. The small heater in the corner buzzed weakly. You're freezing, he said, running to hug her. Clara knelt, holding him tight. Just got caught in the snow, that's all. He pulled back, frowning. You're crying. She wiped her face quickly. Snowflakes. They melt funny. He studied her with that too-old look children get when they've seen too much. Did something happen at work? Clara hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but the truth would scare him. They let me go, honey. But it's okay. We'll be fine. Ethan's shoulders slumped. Because of me? Because of the hospital bills? Her heart cracked clean in 2. No, she said firmly. Because my boss forgot what kindness looks like. He tried to smile, but tears welled up anyway. Clara brushed them away. Hey, don't cry. I'll find something else. I always do. The heater flickered. The room dimmed. She glanced at the power meter by the door. 3 red lights. The electric company had sent a warning last week. Payment overdue. Ethan coughed, that deep, rattling cough that made her chest tighten. She hurried to the kitchen, shaking a nearly empty bottle of medicine. We've got enough for tonight, she murmured. He sat on the couch, hugging his blanket. Can I watch the snow from the window? Sure, she said softly. She handed him a cup of warm milk and joined him. Outside, the storm painted the city in shades of grey and white. The street was empty except for a single, dark figure standing across the road. Clara squinted. The man didn't move. He just stood there, his face hidden under a hat. Her pulse jumped. Mom, Ethan whispered. Who's that? She blinked, and the figure was gone. Only swirling snow remained. Nobody, sweetheart. Just the wind playing tricks. She tucked him in early that night. When his breathing finally settled into the steady rhythm of sleep, she sat by the window, staring at the faint glow of streetlights through the snow. Her phone buzzed on the table. A new message from the hospital billing department. Final notice. Payment required within 48 hours to continue treatment. Clara turned off the screen and pressed the phone against her chest. Just one more day, she whispered. I'll figure it out tomorrow. A knock echoed softly through the apartment. She froze. Who would come at this hour? She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. No one. Just snow. But when she opened the door, a small white envelope lay on the doormat. No name, no address. She picked it up with trembling hands. Inside, under the glow of the weak hallway light, she unfolded a single note. For Ethan, SR. And beneath it, a money order for $10,000. Clara barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the envelope again. The neat handwriting, the initials, the impossible number printed on the money order. $10,000. It was more money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to pay Ethan's hospital bills, the rent, maybe even start over. But it didn't make sense. She didn't know anyone with those initials. SR. By dawn, her mind was racing with possibilities. A scam? A mistake? Or Sam Reed, the old man from the diner. The thought made her chest tighten. Could he have done this? How? He didn't even have a wallet, let alone $10,000. The heater buzzed to life, and Ethan stirred on the couch. He'd fallen asleep there again, clutching his stuffed bear. Morning, buddy, she said softly. He smiled sleepily. Did you find a new job yet? Not yet, she said, smoothing his hair. But I might have gotten some help. He sat up. From who? I'm not sure, she admitted. Maybe an angel. He grinned. Like in the Christmas movies? Something like that. She smiled back, though her stomach twisted with unease. By noon, the snow had stopped. The world outside glittered under the pale winter sun, all sharp edges and silver light. Clara dressed in her warmest coat and walked to the nearest check-cashing place. She stood at the counter, hands trembling as she slid the money order across. The clerk squinted at it. Issued by Hale Financial Group. That's a big one. You sure it's yours? Clara nodded slowly. It was left at my door. He raised an eyebrow but shrugged. Well, it's real. Congratulations. When she walked out, the crisp bills in her purse felt like both a miracle and a weight. She should have felt joy, but instead there was dread, cold and heavy in her gut. That night, after Ethan went to bed, a knock sounded at the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Clara's heart jumped. She crossed the room and looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, tall, sharply dressed, his coat dusted with snow. Not Sam. Someone else. She cracked the door open. Can I help you? Ms. Hart? His voice was low, even. "My name is Henry Shaw. I work for Mr. Samuel Reed. He asked me to deliver a message." Clara gripped the edge of the door. "Sam? From the diner?" "Yes, ma'am," Henry said. "Mr. Reed wanted to make sure you received the funds safely." Her pulse quickened. How did he even know where I live?" Henry smiled faintly. "He has resources. Mr. Reed has been searching for someone kind, someone decent. He found that in you." Clara stared, speechless. "He's not really homeless, is he?" Henry hesitated, then shook his head. "No, ma'am. Not exactly." "Who is he?" Henry glanced down the hallway, as if the shadows might be listening. "That's not for me to say, but he asked me to give you this." He handed her a small black card, embossed in gold letters, Hale Enterprises. Below it, a number. Clara's breath caught. "Hale? Like the company from the news?" Henry nodded once. "He'll explain everything himself. Tomorrow, noon, he'll send a car." She stared at the card, her thoughts spinning. "Why me?" she whispered. Henry met her gaze. "Because when the world looked away from him, you didn't." Without another word, he tipped his hat and walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing against the worn linoleum, until they faded into silence. Clara closed the door slowly, the black card still clutched in her hand. She glanced toward Ethan's bedroom, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. And for the first time in years, she realized her life was no longer predictable. It was about to collide with something far bigger than she could ever imagine. The next morning, Clara could barely eat. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling, and her coffee had gone cold long before she realized she hadn't taken a sip. The black card from last night sat on the table like a live wire. Hale Enterprises. She'd seen that name in the news. Tech empires, real estate, luxury towers. But what did any of that have to do with an old man in a torn coat drinking free coffee in her section? Ethan sat across from her, munching cereal. "Are we going somewhere fancy, Mom?" he asked, his mouth full. "Something like that," she said, trying to smile. "Someone wants to talk to me about a job." "Will it pay good?" she hesitated. "I hope so." At 11:45 sharp, a black sedan pulled up outside the apartment. It didn't belong in her neighborhood. The paint gleamed, the windows tinted dark as obsidian. A man in a driver's uniform stepped out and knocked gently. "Ms. Hart," he said, "Mr. Reed is expecting you." Ethan clung to her coat sleeve. "Do you have to go?" "I'll be back soon," she said, kissing the top of his head. "Lock the door, okay? And no TV until homework's done," he groaned. "Yes, ma'am." The ride was silent, except for the hum of the tires on wet asphalt. Clara pressed her palms together in her lap, staring out at the blur of the city as the sedan wound its way into a part of town she'd never seen before. Then the car turned through a set of wrought-iron gates and up a long driveway lined with old oak trees. The mansion at the end looked like it had been pulled straight out of another century. Massive stone walls, tall windows, the kind of place where money didn't just live, it echoed. The driver opened her door. "He's waiting inside, ma'am." Clara hesitated before stepping out. The cold air bit her cheeks as she walked toward the heavy front doors. A butler opened them before she could knock. "Ms. Hart," he said with a polite bow. "This way, please." The interior was breathtaking. Marble floors, chandeliers that shimmered like rain, and paintings that looked too valuable to even glance at for long. Every surface reflected wealth, power, and something else. Emptiness. At the end of a long hallway, she saw him. Sam, no, Mr. Reed, stood by a grand piano, dressed in a charcoal suit. His beard was neatly trimmed, his posture straight. The transformation was almost unreal. Gone was the hunched, fragile man from the diner. When he turned, his eyes softened. "Clara," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Thank you for coming." She stared, speechless. You're not homeless, he finished for her, smiling faintly. No, not anymore. Her mind spun. Why? Why pretend? Why the diner? Why me? He walked closer, his gaze full of something heavy. Regret, maybe. Because I needed to know there were still people like you, people who give when they have nothing left to give. That's not an answer, she said, folding her arms. You left $10,000 at my door. You sent a car. What do you want from me? He paused, then said quietly, Nothing. I owe you something, not the other way around. I don't understand, she whispered. He nodded toward a small table beside the piano. On it sat a framed photo, faded, old. A woman smiling, holding a little boy. My wife and son, he said softly. They died 15 years ago. I built an empire trying to fill the hole they left behind. But money doesn't fill anything. Clara stared at the photo, her heart tightening. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He smiled sadly. You shouldn't be. You reminded me of them. She blinked. Me? Yes, he said, voice trembling now. You and your son. I've been following your story longer than you think. Her pulse stopped. What do you mean? He looked straight into her eyes. Because I knew your husband, Clara, and his death wasn't an accident. The room seemed to shrink around her as his words sank in. Her past, her pain, and her kindness were all part of something far bigger than she'd ever imagined. Clara froze, her fingers tightening on the strap of her purse. The word accident echoed in her head like a cruel joke. Her husband, Mark, had died 3 years earlier in a warehouse collapse. A tragic construction mishap, the newspapers called it. But hearing this stranger, this billionaire, speak as if he knew the truth made her skin crawl. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaking. You didn't even know my husband. Samuel, if that was even his real name anymore, lowered his gaze. His name was Mark Hart. He worked on the North Line project outside the city, correct? Clara nodded slowly, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. He was the foreman. He was killed when the scaffolding failed. Samuel sighed, his shoulders heavy. It wasn't an accident, Clara. That project was one of mine. Her breath caught. Yours? I was the investor, he said. The contractors cut corners to save costs. I signed the final approval without checking the reports. When the structure failed, 6 men died, including your husband. Clara's vision blurred. The floor seemed to sway under her feet. You knew all this time. I didn't know who he was, he said quietly. Not until later. Not until I saw his name listed among the dead. And by then, it was too late. She shook her head, backing away. You had lawyers, settlements, statements about deep regret. I remember. You never even showed up to the memorial. He looked up at her, his blue eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Because I couldn't face them. I couldn't face you. Clara's hands trembled. You think money fixes that? You think writing a check makes it right? No, he said firmly. Money fixes nothing, but I wanted to find a way to make something good out of what I destroyed. Her throat tightened. So you played dress-up as a homeless man, she snapped. You wanted to feel better about yourself, is that it? He flinched but didn't look away. I wanted to find someone who still believed in goodness, someone who could remind me it wasn't all gone. Well, congratulations, she said bitterly. You found your saint. Now what? He hesitated, then stepped closer. Clara, listen to me. That envelope wasn't charity. It was restitution. A small part of what I owe you and your son. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. You have no idea what you've done to us. Ethan barely remembers his father. Every night, I tell him stories about a man who was brave and kind, And now you're telling me he died because you didn't read a report? I can't undo it, he said softly. But I can make sure his son has a future. I don't want your money, she said through clenched teeth. This isn't about money anymore, he said. It's about legacy. I'm dying, Clara. The words hit her like ice water. What? He gave a small, tired smile. Heart condition. The doctors gave me a year, maybe less. I've spent decades building towers that'll outlive me. But none of it matters. Not if I leave this world without doing something right. Her anger faltered, replaced by confusion and a flicker of pity she didn't want to feel. So this is your redemption story? He nodded slowly. If you'll let it be. She turned away, staring at the grand windows overlooking the frozen garden outside. The man behind her, this ghost wearing a billionaire's skin, had wrecked her world without ever meeting her. And now he wanted forgiveness. She wiped her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. You can't just fix what's broken, Sam. Some things stay cracked forever. He didn't answer, just stood there in silence, his reflection trembling in the window beside hers. And in that quiet, something shifted. The first fragile spark of truth, waiting to burn everything they both thought they knew. Clara left the mansion before the sun dipped below the skyline, her heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted to escape her chest. The icy air hit her face, but she barely felt it. She just kept walking, down the driveway, past the gate, and straight onto the long road back to the city. The words replayed in her head on a cruel loop. Your husband's death wasn't an accident. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were shaking so badly, she dropped her keys twice. Ethan ran to her the moment she stepped inside. Mom, you're home. She forced a smile, kneeling to hug him. Yeah, baby. I'm home. He frowned, looking up at her pale face. You look sick. Just tired, she said softly. Go finish your homework, okay? He hesitated, but obeyed, retreating to his little desk by the window. Clara leaned against the door, pressing her palms to her face. Every part of her wanted to scream, to cry, to destroy the memory of that mansion. But one thought kept cutting through the chaos. Was it true? She turned on her old laptop, the screen flickering to life. Her fingers flew over the keys. Northline construction accident. Hale Enterprises. The search results were instant. Articles, photos, public statements. There it was, a press release with Samuel Hale's signature at the bottom. We at Hale Enterprises express our deepest condolences. Clara clicked through the pages, scanning every line, every name. Then she froze. The report listed the cause as equipment failure due to oversight in subcontractor materials. But in the comments section of one archived article, buried beneath the condolences and outrage, a single username caught her eye. Henry S. The comment read, "It wasn't an accident. They knew the bolts were defective weeks before. I have the documents." Her blood ran cold. Henry Shaw, the driver. She grabbed the black card from her purse. Hale Enterprises. On the back, a single phone number glinted under the light. Her thumb hovered over it. She didn't owe them anything, but she needed answers. She dialed. After 3 rings, a voice answered. Henry Shaw speaking. It's Clara Hart. There was silence on the other end. Then, I figured you might call. I read something online, she said. A comment from someone named Henry S. Was that you? A long exhale. Yes, ma'am. Her grip tightened on the phone. Is it true? About the bolts? Yes, he said quietly. The engineers flagged the issue weeks before the collapse, but the project deadline was tight and upper management overruled the delay. The cheaper materials went in anyway. Upper management, Clara repeated. You mean Samuel? Another pause. He signed the papers, yes, but he didn't know the details, not until after the accident. I was there when he found out. He fired the entire board, Clara. Tried to go after the contractor in court. They buried him in red tape. She sat down, her knees weak. Why didn't any of this come out? Because it would have destroyed him. And your husband's memory, too. The company paid the families, but Samuel wanted to do more. He started looking for you a year later. Clara's throat burned. Why me? Why now? Because you're the one person he couldn't face, Henry said, and now he doesn't have much time left to try. Clara closed her eyes. The weight of it all pressed down like a storm cloud. The anger, the grief, the confusion. They tangled together until she couldn't tell one from the other. Henry, she whispered, if he really wanted forgiveness, he should have come clean years ago. Henry's voice was calm, almost pleading. Maybe. But people break differently, Clara. You lost someone. He lost himself. The line went quiet. She hung up slowly, staring at the flickering laptop screen, and as the snow began to fall outside again, she realized the truth she'd just uncovered wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. The next morning, Clara woke to the sharp rap of knuckles on her apartment door. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. But the knock came again, steady and firm. She pulled on her robe and opened the door. Brenda stood there, her old manager. The last person Clara ever expected to see again. Brenda? Clara blinked in disbelief. What are you doing here? Brenda looked uncomfortable, her usual sharpness dulled. Can I come in for a minute? Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. Sure. What's going on? Brenda took a breath, glancing around the tiny apartment. The cracked walls, the second-hand furniture, the sound of cartoons faintly playing from Ethan's room. You look better than I thought, she said awkwardly. Listen, this isn't easy for me to say. Corporate called the diner last night. Some big executive from Hale Enterprises said they're auditing all partner restaurants. Clara frowned. And? And they told me to rehire you, Brenda said. Full pay, benefits, back pay for the month you missed. Clara blinked. That doesn't make sense. Brenda shrugged. I don't make the rules. I just follow them. But they were very specific. You're supposed to come in tomorrow morning. Clara stared at her, suspicion prickling under her skin. Did they say why? Brenda hesitated. Just that someone up top requested it personally. The name Hale hit like a quiet drumbeat in her mind. Samuel Reed. Brenda, she said carefully, if I go back, is this going to be one of those situations where you glare at me for serving free coffee again? Brenda gave a short, embarrassed laugh. Probably not. Let's just say someone made a few calls that scared the owner half to death. He told me to treat you like royalty. Clara managed a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Guess miracles happen? After Brenda left, Clara sat on the couch, staring at the rehire notice she'd been handed. At the bottom, in small print, was a signature she recognized instantly. S. Hale. Her pulse raced. Was this another way of making things right? Or was she being pulled into something else entirely? That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Samuel's face, his haunted expression, the way his voice cracked when he said, I'm dying. She wanted to hate him, but hate was exhausting, and she was already tired enough just surviving. By morning, the diner looked almost unfamiliar. The neon sign had been replaced. The cracked tiles near the door were fixed. Even the coffee smelled better. Brenda greeted her with an awkward half-smile. Welcome back, superstar. Clara hung her coat and tied her apron, trying to shake the nerves crawling up her spine. Feels weird being back. Well, Brenda said, lowering her voice, you've got a reservation at table 7. Clara froze. Table 7? Brenda nodded. Some VIP meeting. They said you'd know what to do. She walked toward the corner booth, the same booth where she'd first met him. It looked the same, yet everything felt heavier. She straightened the sugar packets, adjusted the napkin holder. Then the bell above the door jingled. A man in a dark coat stepped in, followed by another figure. A woman this time. She was elegant, mid-60s, with sharp eyes and silver hair. Her presence filled the room with quiet command. Brenda rushed forward. "Good morning, Miss Hale." Clara froze mid-step. Hale. The woman's gaze landed on her. "You must be Clara," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "I'm Martha Hale, Samuel's sister." Clara's heart skipped. Yes, I didn't know he had family." Martha smiled faintly. "Few people do. My brother prefers secrets to company." She slid into the booth and gestured for Clara to sit. "He told me everything, dear, and before you judge him too harshly, you should know. He's not the only one who's been keeping secrets." Clara stared at her, the noise of the diner fading into silence. "What are you talking about?" Martha folded her hands. "Your husband's death wasn't the only thing Hale Enterprises covered up." And just like that, the ground beneath Clara's life began to crack open again, revealing a truth far more dangerous than guilt or grief. Clara sat across from Martha Hale, her stomach tight, her hands clasped so hard her knuckles were white. The diner noise faded to a low hum around them, the hiss of the coffee maker and clatter of plates barely reaching her ears. Martha's presence was calm, but her eyes, those steel-grey eyes, held the weight of someone who'd seen too much and hidden even more. "What do you mean, covered up?" Clara asked. Martha leaned back in the booth, her pearl bracelet clinking softly against the table. "My brother wasn't the only one responsible for that accident. The truth was buried before it ever reached the press." Clara's breath caught. "Buried by who?" Martha's gaze flicked toward the window, as if weighing what to say. "The board of directors, investors, people who cared more about money than the bodies pulled from that wreckage. When Samuel tried to make it right, they forced him out of his own company. Everything since then, his silence, his guilt, it was the cost of their deal." Clara's heart pounded in her chest. "Why tell me this now?" Martha smiled faintly. "Because my brother is dying, and when he's gone, they'll come for his legacy. They'll rewrite the story one last time. You and your son are part of that story, whether you like it or not." Clara shook her head. "I don't want to be part of any of this. I just want to take care of Ethan." Martha studied her. "That's exactly why he chose you. He said you reminded him of his wife, strong, decent, a little too forgiving for your own good." Clara looked down at her trembling hands. "He has a strange way of showing gratitude." Martha reached into her coat and slid an envelope across the table. "He wants you to come to the estate again. He's moved into the Hale Manor permanently. It's where things will be decided." Clara frowned. "Decided?" "His will," Martha said quietly. "His company. His money. He wants to see you before it's too late." Clara stared at the envelope, unsure whether to touch it. "I don't need anything from him." Martha's tone softened. "You might not, but your son will." Something in the way she said it made Clara's stomach twist. She thought of Ethan's fragile lungs, the hospital bills waiting like wolves at the door. She took the envelope. "Fine, but after that, I'm done." Martha smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "That's what I said once." Later that evening, Clara found herself once again in the black sedan, watching the city fade behind her. The driver was silent this time, his eyes fixed ahead as the car wound through the snow-lined countryside. When they reached the gates of Hale Manor, the massive iron doors opened slowly, creaking like something ancient waking from sleep. The mansion loomed in front of her, grand and cold, its marble pillars glowing under the soft light of dusk. Inside, Everything was too perfect. Polished floors that reflected the chandeliers above. Hallways lined with paintings of people whose eyes seemed to follow her. A housekeeper led her down a corridor to a door at the far end. "He's waiting for you, ma'am." Clara hesitated before stepping inside. The room was dim, filled with the faint scent of cedar and old books. Samuel sat by the fireplace, thinner now, his skin pale beneath the flickering light. "You came," he said quietly, a tired smile crossing his face. Clara stood frozen near the doorway. "Your sister found me," he nodded. "She always did have a way of fixing what I broke." Her voice was cold. "You've got a lot to fix." Samuel gestured to the walls around them. "Then let's start here. This house was built with the money that killed your husband. If it can't buy forgiveness, maybe it can buy truth." Clara's heart thudded painfully. "What truth?" He met her gaze, his voice breaking. "The night of the accident. Your husband wasn't just a victim, Clara. He tried to stop it." And for the first time, she realized her husband hadn't just died in the collapse. He had died fighting against it. Clara stared at Samuel, her breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean he tried to stop it?" Samuel's eyes reflected the firelight, tired and heavy with guilt. "Your husband wasn't just another worker. He was the only one who spoke up when the blueprints were changed. He knew the structure wouldn't hold. He filed a report to management, a report that never reached my desk." Clara's voice trembled. "You're saying they ignored him?" Samuel nodded. "They did worse. They buried it. 2 days before the collapse, he called the corporate office. He demanded to meet me, but the board intercepted his messages. They told him to keep quiet or lose his job." Clara sank into the nearest chair, her heart pounding. "He never told me that. He said things were fine. He didn't want me to worry." Samuel's expression softened. "He loved you. That much was obvious from everything I've learned." Clara pressed her palms against her face. The truth hit her like a tidal wave. Her husband had died not because of bad luck, but because he tried to do the right thing. She looked up sharply. "Why are you telling me this now? What's the point?" "Because the same men who silenced him are still running my company," Samuel said quietly. "And when I die, they'll take everything, my empire, my reputation, and bury the truth forever." "So what do you want from me?" she asked bitterly. "To help you die, feeling better about yourself?" He shook his head slowly. "No. I want you to help me finish what your husband started." Clara stared at him, stunned. "You're insane. I'm a waitress, not a lawyer." Samuel gave a faint, pained smile. "You're a mother who knows what's right. That's more than most of them can say." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young nurse stepped in, carrying a tray of medicine. "Mr. Hale, it's time." Samuel waved her off gently. "Just a minute." The nurse left, closing the door softly behind her. Clara stood, pacing. "So what? You want me to go up against your board of billionaires? Risk everything for your redemption arc?" Samuel's tone was calm, but there was a flicker of desperation in it. "I've already risked everything, but I can't go public myself. I'm not strong enough anymore. I need someone who can carry the truth after I'm gone." She turned to him, eyes blazing. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because you already have." Clara frowned. "What are you talking about?" He gestured toward the table. A stack of files sat there. Blueprints, reports, letters, and photographs. On top of them, a newspaper clipping. "Waitress fired for helping homeless man." Her hands shook as she picked it up. "You had someone following me." "I had someone watching over you," he corrected softly. "After that day at the diner, I wanted to see what kind of person you really were. Everything I found proved what I already knew. You have more integrity than anyone in my company." She slammed the paper down. "You invaded my life." "I saved it," he said, his voice low but firm. "Your son's treatments, the rent, the bills, they're all paid. I've been taking care of you, Clara. Quietly. from the shadows. Her breath caught. That was you? The hospital payments? He nodded. Through my sister's foundation. You and Ethan are listed under the Hale Trust. Clara took a step back, her head spinning. So you've been playing God with my life. You think that makes up for what you did? No, Samuel whispered. It doesn't make up for anything. But it's the only way I know how to honor the man I destroyed. Clara turned toward the door, her voice cold. You can't buy forgiveness, Samuel. Not with money. Not with secrets. He didn't stop her. He just said quietly, You're right. But sometimes the truth costs more than forgiveness ever could. And as she walked out of that marble room, she realized the real fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. The snow had started again by the time Clara reached the front gates of Hale Manor. The cold bit through her coat, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was a storm of fury and disbelief. Samuel Hale, the man who ruined her life, had been paying her bills like some twisted guardian angel. Every dollar she'd accepted unknowingly was stained with guilt. She marched down the long driveway, muttering under her breath. He thinks he can buy redemption. He thinks money fixes everything. But she couldn't shake the tremor in his voice when he'd said, I'm dying. That part had sounded real. By the time she got home, the sky had gone dark. Ethan was asleep on the couch, his inhaler clutched in one small hand. She brushed his hair from his forehead and sat beside him, her chest tightening. He was the only reason she hadn't fallen apart completely. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something, maybe instinct, made her swipe to answer. Ms. Hart, a woman's voice said softly. This is Martha Hale. Clara's stomach dropped. How did you get my number? I gave it to myself, Martha said dryly. My brother wanted me to check on you. He's not well tonight. Clara's grip tightened on the phone. If this is about the money, tell him I don't want another cent. This isn't about money, Martha said. It's about Daniel. Clara frowned. Who's Daniel? There was a pause. His son, the one who disappeared 20 years ago. Clara sat up straighter. I thought they died, him and his wife. His wife, yes, Martha said, but not his son, at least not officially. Daniel ran away after the funeral. He blamed Samuel for her death. The boy was 16, angry, brilliant, and reckless. He vanished one night and never came back. My brother's been looking for him ever since. Clara rubbed her temples. Why are you telling me this? Because Samuel believes your husband might have known something. They worked at the same site, didn't they? Clara froze. Yes, Mark mentioned a kid once, an intern or something. Said he didn't belong on a construction site. Thought he was a runaway. That was Daniel, Martha said. He used his mother's maiden name, Reed. That's where your brother-in-law got the alias. Samuel started using it when he began searching for his son. The words hit like a punch. Sam Reed, the homeless man who wasn't homeless. The billionaire hiding behind a name that wasn't his. Clara swallowed hard. So the man I fed at the diner, he was using his dead wife's last name? Martha sighed. He's been living as that ghost for years. I think he thought if he went low enough, if he stripped away the power and the money, he might find his son again. Instead, he found you. Clara stared at the floor. And now he's dying. And I'm supposed to what? Forgive him? Help him rewrite his legacy? No, Martha said softly. You're supposed to help him find peace. He believes his son is still alive. He believes you're the key to finding him. Clara let out a hollow laugh. I'm a waitress, not a detective. Maybe, Martha replied. But your husband tried to protect that boy once. I think Daniel knew something that could destroy the men who caused the collapse. That's why he ran. And if he's still out there, those same people will do anything to keep him silent. Clara's pulse quickened. You think they'd come after me? Not yet, Martha said, but they will, once they realize you know too much. Clara looked toward Ethan's bedroom door, her heart tightening. Then they'll have to go through me first. Martha's voice softened. Good. Because if you're brave enough to help Samuel finish this, you might just bring justice to both your husband and his son." And for the first time, Clara realized her family's tragedy and Samuel's were tangled in the same cruel web, and pulling one thread might unravel everything. Morning came grey and heavy, the kind of light that made the world look tired. Clara sat by the window, her mind still racing from Martha's call. Every piece of her life, her husband's death, Samuel's guilt, the lost son, was starting to fit together like a puzzle she didn't want to solve. The sound of Ethan's soft cough snapped her back. She hurried to his room. He was awake, pale but smiling. "Morning, Mum." "Morning, sweetheart," she said, brushing his hair back. "How's your chest?" He lifted his inhaler. "Better. The nurse said the medicine's helping." Clara froze. "What nurse?" He frowned, confused. "The nice lady who came by yesterday. She said Mr. Hale sent her." Clara's stomach dropped. "Ethan, no one's supposed to come in without me here." He looked down, guilt flickering in his small face. "She had your name on her badge. She brought food, too." Clara stood quickly, her pulse pounding. She ran to the front door and checked the locks, untouched. But on the counter, she saw a small envelope. Her name was written in neat, looping handwriting. Inside was a check, made out for $50,000. Her breath caught. Beneath it, a single line of text. "For Ethan's future. No conditions." She crumpled the paper in her fist, fury boiling up. He was doing it again, trying to buy his way out of everything. She grabbed her phone and dialed the Hale estate. The line clicked, and Henry Shaw's calm voice answered. "Ms. Hart." "I want you to tell him to stop," Clara said through clenched teeth. "Stop sending people to my house. Stop writing checks. Stop pretending this fixes anything." Henry's tone softened. "He's trying to help." "Help?" she snapped. "You call this help? He's invading my life." "Clara," Henry said gently. "Samuel's getting worse. The doctors don't think he'll last the month. He just wants to make sure you and your son are safe." Her anger faltered. "What do you mean, safe?" There was a pause. "Because the board knows you're involved now, and not everyone wants the truth coming out." Clara gripped the phone tighter. "Are you saying they're watching me?" "I'm saying they already know who you are," Henry said. "Samuel's been preparing a statement. Evidence. Names. Documents. If he releases it, it'll destroy men who've controlled this city for decades. But he won't survive the backlash if he's alone." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "And you think I can help him?" "I think you're the only one who will." She hung up and sank into a chair. Outside, snow was falling again, soft and relentless. The world felt too quiet, like the calm before something terrible. A knock broke the silence. Clara froze, every muscle tensing. Slowly, she opened the door a crack. A delivery man stood there, holding a small brown package. "Delivery for Clara Hart." She signed for it, hands trembling. When she tore it open, she found a single flash drive and a note. "For your eyes only, S.H." She inserted the drive into her laptop. A folder appeared, hundreds of files, photographs, and reports. But one image stopped her cold. It was her husband, Mark, standing beside a young man with sharp eyes and dark hair, barely out of his teens. The caption on the report read, "Daniel Hale, apprentice engineer, North Line Project." Clara's breath hitched. Her husband hadn't just known Samuel's son. He'd been protecting him. And below the photo was a line from Mark's final report. "If anything happens to me, Daniel knows the truth." Her hands went cold. Daniel, the missing son, the one who'd vanished after the collapse. She whispered, "He's alive." From the doorway, Ethan's small voice interrupted her. "Mom, what's wrong?" Clara turned slowly, her pulse pounding. "Nothing, honey. Go lie down." But inside, she knew everything had changed. Because if Daniel Hale was still alive, He was the missing piece, the key to exposing the people who'd taken everything from them both. That night, the city felt colder than ever. The streets glowed under pale streetlights, quiet except for the wind scraping against the windows. Clara sat at her kitchen table, the flash drive still plugged into her laptop. File after file stared back at her. Emails, payment trails, safety reports, all pointing to one thing. The North Line disaster hadn't been a mistake. It had been covered up. Every click made her chest tighter. The deeper she went, the uglier it got. Names of executives, offshore accounts, falsified signatures. Samuel's, her husband's death certificate. She whispered, "My God!" Her hands trembled as she reached the last folder. It was labeled Project D19. When she opened it, her screen filled with photos of Daniel Hale, older now, maybe in his 30s, working under a fake name at a small construction firm in Colorado. He was alive and hiding. Before she could process it, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Hart," a man's voice said, low and smooth. "You've been very busy." Her blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who works for people with a lot to lose," the voice replied. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." She swallowed hard. "You're talking about the files." "Good," he said. "Then you understand. You'll hand them over. Tonight." Clara stood, her heart pounding. "If these files prove what I think they do, they belong to the families of the men who died." A pause, then a quiet laugh. "You sound just like your husband." Her stomach twisted. "You knew him?" "I knew he didn't listen either. Don't make his mistake." The line went dead. She stared at her phone, her pulse roaring in her ears. Ethan stirred in the other room, coughing again. The sound snapped her back to reality. She shut the laptop and yanked out the flash drive. "Not tonight," she muttered. "Not with him here." She grabbed her coat and slipped the drive into her pocket. Outside, the wind bit hard, slicing through her breath. She hurried to the payphone across the street. She didn't trust her own phone anymore. And dialed Henry Shaw. He picked up instantly. "Clara?" "Someone called," she said. "They know I have the files. They want them tonight." "Where are you?" "Home." "Get out," Henry said sharply. "Right now. Don't pack. Don't call anyone. Go to the old service station on Route 8. I'll meet you there." She hesitated. "Ethan, I'll send a car for him," Henry said. "You can't both stay there. Please, Clara. They're dangerous." Something in his tone convinced her. She ran back inside, grabbed Ethan's coat and shoes, and shook him gently awake. "Sweetheart, we're going for a drive." He blinked sleepily. "At night?" "Yes, baby. Just for a bit. Mommy needs to talk to someone." As she buckled him into the back seat, a black SUV turned the corner and slowed near her building. Her stomach dropped. Headlights glared across the snow. "Hold on," she whispered, slamming the gearshift into drive. The tires screeched as she pulled away. Her pulse raced as she checked the mirror. The SUV followed. She sped down the empty street, snow flying under her tires. "Mom?" Ethan cried. "What's happening?" "It's okay," she lied. "Everything's okay." The SUV's lights grew closer. She turned sharply onto a side road, her breath shallow. The sign for Route 8 flashed by. The service station was just ahead, its old neon sign flickering weakly in the dark. She pulled in fast, skidding to a stop. Henry's car was already there. He jumped out, waving. Clara grabbed the flash drive, shoved it into her coat pocket, and pulled Ethan out of the car. "Take him," she said, thrusting her son into Henry's arms. "Get him somewhere safe." "What about you?" Henry demanded. She turned toward the approaching headlights. "They want me, not him." And as the black SUV rolled to a stop in front of her, its engine rumbling like thunder, Clara realized she'd crossed a line she could never go back from. The SUV's engine growled low as its doors opened. Two men stepped out, both in dark coats, their faces half hidden by the glow of the station's flickering light. Clara's heartbeat thudded so loud it drowned out the wind. Henry had already driven off with Ethan, the taillights vanishing down Route 8. At least he was safe. That was all that mattered. One of the men spoke first. "You have something that belongs to us." Clara took a step back, clutching her coat pocket where the flash drive burned against her palm. "It doesn't belong to you," she said. "It belongs to the truth." The man chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. "Lady, truth's got a price, and you can't afford it." He moved closer, his boots crunching in the snow. She could smell his cologne, sharp, expensive, out of place in the freezing dark. "Mr. Hale's dying," the second man said flatly. "When he goes, this all goes with him. You can make it easier on yourself. Hand over the drive and we forget you ever existed." Clara's stomach turned. "You think you can erase people like their files on a computer?" "That's exactly how it works," the first man said. The words hit her like ice water. For a heartbeat, she wanted to run. But she'd learned something from losing everything. Fear couldn't stop her anymore. She pulled the flash drive from her pocket and held it up. "You want it? Come take it." They froze, eyes narrowing. She took a step back, gripping the tiny metal stick tighter. "But if anything happens to me, copies of these files go to every journalist in the city. My friend already has them." It was a lie, but she prayed they couldn't tell. The first man scowled. "You're bluffing." "Try me," she said. For a long second, no one moved. The snow whispered against the pavement. Then headlights cut through the darkness, another car pulling into the station. The men turned sharply, hands sliding into their coats. Clara's breath caught. The new car stopped, and a familiar voice shouted, "Clara!" Samuel Hale stepped out, leaning heavily on a cane. His driver, Henry, followed close behind. "What the hell are you doing here?" Clara yelled. "You're supposed to be in a hospital." Samuel ignored her, his face pale but determined. "Leave her alone," he barked at the two men. "It's over." The first man laughed bitterly. "You think showing up in person changes anything? You signed this deal, Hale. You built your empire with us. You're not the hero here." Samuel's jaw tightened. "No, but I'm done being the villain." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. "Every document, every signature. You'll find copies of it here. I've already sent the originals to the press. Your threats mean nothing now." Clara's eyes widened. "You did what?" He looked at her, a faint smile ghosting across his face. "You were right. Money can't fix it. Only truth can." The men glanced at each other, realization dawning too late. "You idiot," one of them hissed. "You've just signed your own death warrant." Samuel didn't flinch. "I already did that when I let 6 good men die." The man lunged forward. Henry moved first, stepping between them, his hand raised. "Don't!" For a tense moment, no one breathed. Then the two men backed off, fury etched into their faces. "This isn't over," one growled before retreating to the SUV. When the car disappeared into the night, Clara turned to Samuel. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice shaking. He smiled faintly. "I had to make it right before it was too late." Then his knees buckled. Henry caught him before he hit the ground. "Call an ambulance!" Clara shouted. Samuel's lips moved faintly. "Don't let them win." His eyes fluttered shut, and as sirens wailed in the distance, Clara realized that the man she once hated might have just sacrificed everything to save her, and the truth he'd spent a lifetime running from. The ambulance tore through the night, red lights painting the snow in streaks of color. Clara sat beside Samuel on the gurney, clutching his cold hand as the paramedics worked furiously. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. The heart monitor beeped unevenly, each sound slicing through her chest. "Sir, stay with us," one of the medics said. "Mr. Hale, can you hear me?" Samuel's lips moved faintly. "Don't let them stop the truth." "Save your strength," Clara whispered. "You're going to make it." But even as she said it, she saw the truth in the paramedic's eyes. Samuel Hale's body was failing him faster than medicine could keep up. At the hospital, they rushed him into surgery. Clara stood frozen at the doors as they swung shut, the red operating light flicking on. Henry Shaw placed a hand on her shoulder. "He knew this might happen," Henry said quietly. She turned on him, voice trembling. "You knew, didn't you? You knew he was this sick." Henry nodded grimly. "He wouldn't stop. He said if he had to die, he wanted it to mean something." Clara sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. The smell of antiseptic burned her nose. Every minute dragged by like an hour. She thought of Ethan, safe at Martha's house, sleeping soundly, unaware that the man who had ruined their lives was now dying to protect them. Hours passed. The hallway grew quiet. Then the doors opened, and a surgeon stepped out, pulling off her gloves. "Are you family?" she asked. Clara hesitated. I don't know what I am." The doctor's expression softened. "He made it through surgery, but his heart's weak. He's asking for you." Clara followed her into the recovery room. The machines hummed softly, and Samuel lay there, frail, barely conscious, but alive. His eyes fluttered open when she approached. "You came," he murmured. "I never left," she said. He smiled faintly. "I always knew you had courage." "Stop talking like that," she said, fighting tears. "You're going to recover." He gave a weak laugh. "Clara, I'm not recovering. I'm handing things over." She shook her head. "No, you can't just die and dump this mess in my lap." "Someone has to keep them from burying the truth again," he whispered. "You and Henry, you'll finish it. The files, the testimony, they're already with the press. But they'll try to twist the story." She leaned closer. "What story?" "That your husband died trying to protect my son," he said, his voice fading. "Mark, he knew Daniel was alive. He hid him, got him out of the city before they could silence him. That's why they killed him, Clara. It wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up." Her breath caught. "You're saying Mark died saving your son?" Samuel nodded weakly. "And now, you have to finish what he started." Tears spilled down her face. "I can't do this alone." He squeezed her hand. "You won't. Henry knows where to find Daniel. My sister will protect your boy. You just have to be brave enough to tell the world." The monitor beeped faster, then slowed. His breathing hitched. Clara gripped his hand tighter. "Samuel, don't you dare!" He smiled one last time. "Tell Ethan. I'm sorry for everything I took." The monitor let out a long, steady tone. Clara's world went still. Henry stepped forward, his face drawn. "He's gone." Clara wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. "Then we finish it." She turned toward the window, where dawn was breaking over the city. The sun's first light hit the snow, washing everything in gold. And in that fragile glow she felt the weight of both men's legacies settle on her shoulders. Mark's courage and Samuel's redemption. 2 lives bound by truth, now depending on her to set it free. Morning bled into the hospital corridors, pale and quiet. Clara sat beside Samuel's body, her fingers tracing the edge of the thin blanket covering him. Everything inside her felt hollow. The machines had stopped, the doctors had left, but the silence still carried his last words. Finish what he started. Henry stood by the door, his hat in his hands. "We need to go," he said softly. Clara didn't look up. "I can't just leave him here." "He's not here anymore," Henry replied gently. "You know that." She swallowed hard. He was right. She stood, her legs shaking, and turned to face him. "You said you know where Daniel is. Is that true?" Henry nodded. "Yes. He's been in hiding under the name Daniel Reed. Samuel's been sending him money through shell accounts for years. He wanted to bring him home, but Daniel refused, said he didn't want his father's empire anywhere near him." Clara's hands clenched. "Then he doesn't know what really happened." "No," Henry said, "but he needs to. He's the only living witness who can prove Mark's death wasn't an accident." Clara stared at him. "Then we find him." Henry hesitated. "There's one more thing you should know. The board's already moving to seize Hale Enterprises. They'll paint Samuel as unstable, paranoid. Once that happens, everything he worked for, the truth, the evidence, it all gets buried again." She took a deep breath. "Not if I speak." Henry's eyes widened. "They'll destroy you." "Let them try," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I've already lost everything once." They drove straight from the hospital to the Hale Corporate Tower in downtown Chicago. The glass skyscraper loomed like a monument to greed, glittering in the weak winter sun. Henry parked at the curb and handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Samuel's final statement," he said. "He wrote it last week. Said you were the only one who could read it aloud." Her stomach twisted. "In front of who?" "The board," Henry said. "They called an emergency meeting for 10 o'clock to announce his death and name his successor." Clara looked up at the tower. 30 stories of steel and lies. "Then let's ruin their morning." Inside, the boardroom was all glass and chrome, a room built for power plays. 12 men and women sat around a long table, their faces sharp, impatient. One of them, a silver-haired man with a smug smile, stood as she entered. "You must be Miss Hart," he said. "I'm Thomas Avery, interim CEO. We're very sorry for your loss. But this is a private meeting." Clara set the envelope on the table. "Not anymore." Avery frowned. "Excuse me." She opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. "Samuel Hale wanted this read publicly. His words, not mine." The room went still. Clara began to read. "To the men and women who profited from tragedy, your empire was built on death. I signed papers I didn't understand, and 6 good men paid the price, one of them named Mark Hart. His wife sits before you now. The truth is in the files you tried to bury, and when this letter is read, those files will already be in the hands of the press." Gasps rippled through the room. Avery stood abruptly. "You can't." "Yes, I can," Clara said sharply. And so could he. He finally did. A woman at the end of the table whispered, "My God, the leaks. She's telling the truth." Security burst into the room, confusion everywhere. Cameras flashed outside the glass walls as reporters flooded the lobby downstairs. Clara's heart pounded, but she didn't stop reading until the last line. "Forgive me, if you can, but don't let them forget what it cost." She lowered the letter. Avery's face had gone pale. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Clara met his gaze coldly. "No, you will." And as the first headlines hit the news, Clara realized Samuel's confession hadn't just freed her. It had started a war that could finally bring every secret to light. The storm had broken by the time the funeral came. The city was quiet, wrapped in grey fog, the kind that muffled everything except the sound of church bells. Clara stood under a black umbrella, watching as Samuel Hale's casket was lowered into the ground. The ceremony was small. No reporters, no cameras, just a handful of people who had truly known him. Martha Hale stood beside her, her face calm but unreadable. Henry was there too, his hat pressed against his chest. A priest's voice carried over the soft drizzle. "We commit this man to rest, trusting that his soul finds the peace he sought in life." Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. Peace. It felt too kind a word for a man who'd carried so much guilt. Yet somehow, in his last act, he had given her back something she thought she'd lost. Truth. After the ceremony, Martha turned to her. "The lawyers will read his will this afternoon. He wanted you there." Clara blinked. "Why me?" Martha gave a faint smile. "You'll see." Hours later, they gathered in a paneled office that smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The lawyer, an older man with rimmed glasses, adjusted his tie and opened a leather folder. "This will was signed 2 days before Mr. Hale's passing," he began. The room was silent except for the scratch of his pen across the pages. "To my sister, Martha Hale, I leave the Hale Foundation in full. To my employee and friend, Henry Shaw, I leave my estate's liquid assets in gratitude for his loyalty." He turned another page, his voice steady. "To Clara Hart." Clara's stomach flipped. Everyone turned to look at her. "I leave the controlling interest in Hale Enterprises and the accompanying trust established for her son, Ethan Hart." The words hung in the air like thunder. Clara's breath caught. "What?" The lawyer continued calmly. "Mr. Hale stated, and I quote, 'The company was built on the lives of those we failed. Let the woman who lost the most rebuild it with honesty.'" Martha exhaled slowly, something like pride flickering across her face. "He meant it," she said softly. "He really meant it." Clara shook her head. "I can't run a company. I don't even own a decent car." Henry stepped forward. "He didn't choose you for business, Clara. He chose you for conscience. The company needs someone who won't sell their soul." Clara stared down at her trembling hands. "And what about Daniel?" The lawyer flipped another page. "Mr. Hale left specific instructions regarding his son. A private investigator will continue to search for him under the company's funding. If found, he will share in the estate." She felt a strange ache in her chest, a mix of relief and sadness. Samuel hadn't given up on his son, even to his last breath. When the reading ended, the lawyer handed her a sealed envelope. "He wanted you to have this personally." Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. "Clara, if you're reading this, then I've finally found the courage to face what I've done. You showed me that redemption isn't earned, it's lived. Don't let this company destroy anyone else the way it destroyed me. Let it be something good, for Ethan's future, for your husband's memory, for Daniel if he ever comes home." Samuel Hale. Tears blurred the words until they became a shimmer of ink. Martha laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. I'll help you." Clara nodded slowly, her voice breaking. "Then we start by making sure no one like Mark ever dies for a paycheck again." Outside the window, the clouds were beginning to part, thin streams of sunlight breaking through. And as she folded the letter and tucked it close to her heart, Clara understood that Samuel's redemption was no longer his. It was hers to carry forward. Months passed, and Chicago began to thaw. The snow that had blanketed the city for so long melted into clear sidewalks and soft puddles, the air carrying the smell of rain instead of frost. For the first time in years, Clara could walk without feeling like the weight of the world was pressing against her chest. The Hale Enterprises Tower, once a monument to greed, now bore a new plaque at its entrance, the Hale Hart Foundation for Worker Safety and Reform. Beneath it, etched in smaller letters, "In memory of those who built and those who paid the price." Inside, the lobby no longer gleamed like glass and gold. It was warm now, plants in the corners, photographs of construction crews and families along the walls. The workers called her Ms. Hart, though she always told them to just call her Clara. She'd never meant to lead anything, but maybe leadership, she realized, wasn't about power. It was about decency. Henry had stayed on as her advisor, though he preferred to call himself the old watchdog. He'd been the one to teach her how to handle board meetings without letting the sharks smell blood. Martha worked beside her, turning the old foundation into something real, funding hospitals, rebuilding safer housing, and opening scholarship programs for workers' children. And Ethan, her sweet boy, was thriving. His cheeks had color again. He spent his afternoons drawing at her office window, sketching skylines and bridges. "I'm going to build things like Dad did," he'd said one day, his small voice full of pride. Clara had smiled. "Then you'll build them right." Still, not every wound had healed. Daniel Hale was still out there somewhere. Every month, their investigator sent an update, another possible lead, another false trail. Clara read them all anyway, unwilling to give up the way Samuel never had. One afternoon, as she sorted through paperwork, Henry appeared at her door with a grin. "You've got visitors. Reporters again, she groaned. Not this time. He stepped aside, revealing 3 men in worn construction jackets. They looked nervous, hats in hand. Ms. Hart, one said, we just wanted to say thank you for what you did, for your husband. My dad worked the North Line job. He didn't make it out. But you, his voice broke. You gave us back our dignity. Clara felt her throat tighten. No, she said softly. Your families gave me mine. After they left, she walked to the window, staring out at the skyline. Cranes swung slowly in the distance, sunlight catching on the steel beams of new buildings. For the first time, construction didn't look like a symbol of tragedy. It looked like a second chance. Later that evening, Clara returned to the old diner, the Morning Dove. It had reopened under new ownership, funded by the foundation. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air again. Brenda worked behind the counter, wearing the same tired apron, but now her face held something softer. Humility. Well, look who it is, Brenda said with a grin. Chicago's newest billionaire. Clara laughed. Barely. I think the coffee machine costs more than I make. Brenda poured her a cup anyway. Still, I never thought I'd see you again. You did good, Hart. Clara smiled faintly. No, we did good. This place mattered. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed a small brass plaque by the door, dedicated to Samuel Hale and Mark Hart, 2 men who taught us what integrity costs. She stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, You finally made it right, Sam. The sun dipped low outside, painting the streets gold. Ethan ran in from the car, waving a drawing. Mom! Look, it's your building! She knelt and kissed his forehead. It's our building. And as the last of winter melted away, Clara realized that spring hadn't just come to the city. It had come to her life, too, blooming from loss into something like peace. Spring rolled into summer, soft and green, the city alive again. The river shimmered under sunlight, and laughter echoed from the parks. For the first time in years, Clara didn't wake up afraid of the day ahead. Her mornings belonged to peace, to purpose, and to her son's laughter. The diner had become their little ritual. Every Saturday, she and Ethan stopped there for breakfast before heading to the office. The new sign above the door read, The Morning Dove Community Kitchen, now half diner, half outreach center, funded by the Hale Hart Foundation. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and coffee mingled with the sound of chatter. The booths were full. Veterans, single mothers, construction workers, retirees. No one was turned away. Brenda worked the counter, still bossy, still sharp-tongued, but changed. Clara, your usual, she called. You know me too well, Clara said, sliding into the corner booth. Ethan climbed in beside her, swinging his legs. He pointed toward the framed photo hanging on the far wall, the same one that used to sit in Samuel's study. It showed 2 men shaking hands at a construction site. One was Mark, smiling in his hard hat. The other was a younger Samuel Hale. Below the photo, a plaque read, The foundation of honesty is sacrifice. Ethan tilted his head. Mom, do you think they're together in heaven? Clara smiled softly. I think they're finally at peace. Brenda brought over 2 plates of pancakes and a fresh pot of coffee. On the house, she said. Clara raised an eyebrow. Careful, Brenda. That's how this all started. Brenda chuckled. Don't remind me. Then her tone softened. You turned this place into something beautiful. He'd be proud, your husband, and that stubborn old man, too. Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. Maybe we all just needed a second chance. The bell above the door jingled, and a gust of warm air swept in. A man stepped inside, broad-shouldered, sunburned, wearing a dusty construction jacket. His eyes scanned the room and landed on the plaque. He froze. Something about him tugged at Clara's memory. His hair was darker, his face older, but his eyes, those same storm-grey eyes Samuel once had, made her chest tighten. He walked to the counter. Is this place really the Hale Hart Foundation? Brenda nodded. That's right. You looking for a meal or a miracle? The man gave a small smile. Maybe both. Clara stood slowly, her pulse rising. What's your name? He hesitated. Daniel. Daniel Reed. The room seemed to still. Henry, who'd been sitting by the window with his coffee, nearly dropped his cup. Daniel Hale, he said quietly. The man nodded. Not anymore. Just Reed. Clara's voice trembled. You found us. I saw the story online, he said, about the confession, the foundation. I didn't think I could face it, but I saw my father's handwriting on that plaque, and I had to. Clara took a breath. He spent the rest of his life trying to find you. Daniel's eyes glistened. He shouldn't have. I left because I couldn't forgive him. But he never stopped protecting me, did he? She shook her head. No, he saved my husband for as long as he could. And when he couldn't save him, he saved us instead. Daniel wiped his eyes. Then maybe it's time I stopped running. Clara motioned to the booth. Sit, eat with us. You don't have to be alone anymore. He hesitated, then slid into the seat across from her and Ethan. Ethan grinned. You look like the guy in Mom's stories. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe I am. They ate quietly for a while, the kind of silence that felt like healing. When they finished, Daniel looked up at Clara. So what happens now? She smiled gently. Now we build something that lasts. For them, for us, for everyone who was forgotten. Outside, sunlight poured through the diner's windows, catching the glint of the plaque on the wall. And as laughter filled the room, Clara realized that the circle had finally closed. Grief had become grace, loss had turned to legacy, and the world, at last, had made room for forgiveness. So that's how the story ends. A circle of pain, redemption, and forgiveness finally closing. You're still here, aren't you? If you made it this far, maybe something in Clara's journey touched you. The quiet courage of doing what's right, even when no one's watching. The strength to forgive without forgetting. Her story reminds us that healing doesn't come from revenge, but from truth and compassion. Like the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. Clara could have chosen bitterness. Instead, she chose to rebuild, to turn her suffering into purpose. That's what we can all do. Take what broke us and use it to build something better. Life won't always hand us justice neatly wrapped, but it will always give us a chance to choose who we become next. If this story moved you, if it made you think, share it. Tell someone who's struggling that kindness still matters. And if you believe, like we do, that stories like these can heal, then like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, a story isn't just something you watch. It's something that helps you remember who you are.